guys, it's Reagan and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. This is just a classic cozy style reading vlog where I'm just hoping to jumpstart my reading in the month of January. It's gonna be full of K-dramas, puzzles, and just frankly, vibing. I don't know. But without further ado, let's go ahead and chat about the books I hope to read for this video. So this is my TBR, starting with Shadow of Self by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 to Mistborn Era 2. And I'm actually listening to this primarily on audio. I've been listening to this while doing puzzles and it's so good. I've read this book before, but the audiobook adds like whole new layers, so much dimension. The narrator is fantastic and this book itself is just so entertaining. I'm having a blast listening to it and I'm really struggling not just jumping into book 3 right away once I'm done. I also want to start Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. This is a book that's on my top books I want to read for this year and just a story I feel like I'm going to really love. It's not too long, but it's apparently really intimate and emotional, following 2 young people who fall in love, but they live in a place that is torn apart by war. And as things begin to escalate and get more dangerous, they hear a rumor about doors that can transport you to another place. So they decide to take a leap of faith and walk through one together. And then I also want to at least start the library at Mount Char. Clay picked me up quite a few books at the end of last year and I just want to make sure to prioritize reading them. This one especially just sounded really interesting to me. It's about like an infinite library and a woman who has been working at God's feet her entire life and is sent on a mission to Earth to convince some very normal guy to come back with her to basically take on the great forces of good and evil. It just sounds weird and strange and all of those things I love. But all 3 of these books feel like they could be absolute knockouts for me or I already know I love. So I feel like this is just going to be a really great reading vlog, hopefully full of new favorites. Right now it is about lunchtime on Monday. Whoa, the sun. And I'm actually in the midst of making lunch. I'm making a sweet potato salad. And, oh wait, I actually just hung some pictures up in the dining room, so let me show you that. I'm gonna make lunch, get back to work, and then we're gonna do a lot of reading today. I also do have my pottery class starting back up today with my friend Lucy, which I'm really excited about. But nevertheless, welcome to the vlog. Let's get started. As promised, here's the art I just hung up. I'm nervous it's like too tall. It is eye level to me, but I'm also kind of tall, so I worry that it just looks too high in the room. But regardless, I'm really into all of these prints. Some of them are from Anthropology, from artists. This is an artist that I've been looking at for a long time. Same with this one, and then I got these off of Etsy, all basically collecting pieces of art from artists that I just really like, which is kind of the goal for this house, like vintage art or art from people who I'm really excited to have. So I'm finally happy to I'm thrilled to finally have something up on these walls. They have been bare for a long time. We are truly making some progress. Sweet potatoes are done. Let's go ahead and construct the rest of the salad. Hello. And lunch is served. Time for a candy and coffee break, and I'm gonna start setting up my next puzzle so I can finish my Shadow of Self audiobook. And we are off to pottery class. I am home from pottery, Matilda, and I heated up some leftover Thai. I really improved today, guys. Isn't that right, Millie? And just like that, I am in bed. There's something about pottery class that makes me so tired. It might just be because it's like a 3-hour long class and I get home kind of late, but it's fun. And I've realized now I've done no reading update, but I am about to sit down and start Exit West tonight. I plan to do much more reading tomorrow and the following night for this vlog. Today's just always a little busy because of the class, but I am probably gonna go to bed in the next like 10 minutes. So good night and I will see you in the morning. Hi friends, good morning. I woke up and had a bit of a marathon filming session this AM. So I didn't do any reading, but I do owe you a reading update because I did read 50 pages of Exit West last night, and I can immediately say I'm really enjoying this book. I can see why it's super popular. I mean, from the writing style to the content, it's just not just immediately engaging, but an incredibly unique story and just how it's written and put together. And it has like emotional impact also immediately too. And it's a very short book, but I can definitely see how the author is able to develop so much in such a short amount of time. But again, this is a story of two young people who very quickly fall in love, and their city is also under siege and kind of being torn apart by violence and war. And initially in the story, you're introduced to both of their points of view, and you read about their lives like chapter over chapter, who they were before they met, and then obviously as their relationship begins to develop. So you get insights and kind of not just their decisions, but just what building blocks have made them into who they are today. And also how the expectations of society and the political reality have kind of rubbed off on them in different ways too. You particularly see that with Nadia, the female lead. But you also have these sort of interspersed magical realism-esque chapters of people basically able to transport themselves through dark doorways. And this is definitely obviously trying to be a stand-in for people who are immigrating to try to get a second chance on life, escaping all different terrible situations in hopes of finding a new place that they can call home, and how difficult and how frightening and how scary that situation is, and also kind of how they have to do it quietly and silently in many situations, and also how they have to avoid and perhaps not catch the eye of the quote-unquote locals of this new place. And the imagery that Mohsin Hamid creates with this physical movement and almost making it feel like otherworldly magical realism is not just powerful, but it works so well just from like a literary choice. And again, I've only read 50 pages and I feel so drawn in by this tale. Realistically, I'm 25% of the way through this book. That's how short it is, but also how quickly it reads. Outside of just kind of seeing the beginning of the relationship and understanding our main characters, you also get to see the slow but fast progress of the conflict that is taking up their city, and also the reality of people exist and live their lives and try to work around the new difficult situations that arise, even when it's war, and also how quickly the everyday can just disappear in a blink of an eye. And that's kind of also what the author is doing such a fantastic job of kind of illustrating within this book as well. But yes, 50 pages in, that's my initial reading update. This book is very, very excellent. I'm glad I picked it up. It's definitely not a light read. It's not an easy read by any means, but just the writing style and what the author is like working to do, I'm just finding to be very, very successful. And the thing is too, like, it's obviously the world around these two characters is dark, but their relationship together is such a bright light. They have humor, they have understanding, they have this intimacy. They're just two young kids falling in love, and they're also surrounded by all of this stuff that is completely outside of their control and stuff that they shouldn't have to deal with. All's that to say, it's lunchtime. Clay's actually currently now going to go pick us up lunch. I think I'm going to do a puzzle with lunch. I'm going to start a new puzzle and listen to more of my audiobook of Shadow of Self, which I have about 3.5 hours left, or about 100 or so pages, I want to say. I'm going to try to finish that today. As I already mentioned at the beginning of this video, the audiobook is excellent, truly, truly excellent, and I can't wait to listen to it more. Matilda absolutely vibing, but don't worry, because I'm about to join her. But first, a cup of coffee. And now it's time to start doing some of my puzzle. Quick reminder, that's the puzzle I'm doing. Adorable. I've already started organizing some of the pieces. It has these like giant pieces in it, which I've never really experienced before, but that's fun. I also have some cookies and most importantly, my audiobook, which I'm going to listen to now for a little while. Puzzle, audiobook, caffeinate. It's gonna be a great time. My puzzle progress so far. This puzzle is actually kind of hard because there are edge pieces that aren't the edge. So I am trying a different puzzle strategy of just doing it in clusters. And so far, so good. Also great news, I finished my, it's clearly the evening time now, I finished my audiobook of Shadow of Self, and wow, the last 100 pages of that book were so good. Obviously this was a reread for me, but it's so interesting how much better the Mistborn Era 2 gets with book 2. I feel like there's so much more character development with Wax and Wayne. We get a little bit of backstory, we get a little bit of insight about how they kind of got where they are today. There's also so much that Brandon Sanderson does in terms of world building, connecting to philosophy and fantasy that was referenced or a significant part of the plot in Mistborn Era 1, growing it without like eclipsing what happened in the past in a really artful way. Apologies, my camera died, but what I believe I was in the middle of saying is how impressed I am with how Brandon Sanderson escalated the plot in Mistborn Era 2, using a lot of connections to Era 1, growing on them without actually like eclipsing book 1. It feels like a natural extension, which I'm just really, really enjoying. And just overall, the second book is just so much better. The characters feel so much less like stereotype. Characters no longer feel like two-dimensional. They feel so much more fleshed out, so much more dynamic and likable. And we also got to experience the book from multiple points of view, which I feel like helped. The first one kind of falls back on a lot of like kind of like lazy tropes sometimes, enjoyable and fun, but the second one really you begin to see some more complex relationships and just certain things really, really play out in a more fascinating of ways. It also sets up for an explosive beginning of book 3. I'm not gonna lie, I immediately downloaded the third audiobook because I can't stop reading it. It's so compulsive and fascinating, and just how Brandon Sanderson has continued to develop this world works so well. And he's using a similar dynamic of like this underdog ragtag group of people like taking on what seems to be like an impossible situation, but kind of approaching it from a different angle, which is just very effective. The audiobook narrator too is so good at bringing these characters to life. The humor and the dialogue and all of those elements of this book really shines in the audiobook, and I just find the whole thing to be so unbelievably entertaining, which is why I downloaded book 3. I probably am going to listen to more of the audiobook and puzzle tonight after dinner and some reality TV, but I wanted to give y'all an update, and I will check in later. And I'm gonna read more Exit West tonight. Basically, now that I finished Shadow of Self, I am adding the third Bands of Mourning, the third Mistborn Era 2 book, and then obviously Exit West. So I'm gonna finish this and then try to get as far as I can in that third book. That is my new goal for this vlog. Let's go eat. Dinner is served. Delicious. Back on my puzzling grind. As I mentioned, I got Bands of Mourning. I've already listened to the prologue and I'm officially on chapter 1. So I'm excited to get into this book. So let's do some more puzzling, have a relaxing evening, and then I'll also read Exit West later tonight. Like that, Millie and I are in bed. We're gonna get some reading in and some snuggling in. Isn't that right, Minnie? Good morning, everyone. It is a very gloomy day outside. I am making coffee now. Matilda just had her breakfast. I wanted to say I read another 50 pages of Exit West, which means I'm basically 50% through this book. I'm gonna sit down and read more quite literally right now. But the book is very good. The writing style is just exquisite, and I just feel like the author has such a way with putting us into our characters' heads. I mean, at least feel like we are a visitor in their lives and we get a sense of who and what they are and the choices that they're making. This book has a lot of intensity to it, a lot of tension to it, obviously given the environment that Saeed and Nadia are living in. It's a very dangerous time and all of these things. This is also clearly going to be a story of immigration, which in itself is just a very important story. I will also say picking this book up, like reading this and then reading fantasy and like going back and forth, it's almost like a little bit of whiplash. While this book definitely has fantastical elements, it's one, not the center stage of the story, and it's two, just a touch in terms of like slightly altering how we view a particular action. And I think the choice of the magical realism that's in this story is very, very smart and effective. But obviously it's like a very different style story in tone and purpose than reading, you know, Mistborn Era 2. So I'm like really enjoying both, but it is a little bit like whiplash going back and forth because tonally they are just worlds apart from each other. But that's okay. I'm trying to read more varied this year, and I feel like I'm just gonna have to get used to that experience. I can read a fantasy adventure one day and a very thoughtful and emotionally intense literary fiction story the next, and that is what I'm hoping for. So anyway, I'm gonna sit down. I think the coffee just finished, so I'm gonna pour myself a cup of coffee, sit down and read a bit of this before I have to work today. And I'll keep y'all in the loop with my thoughts, but truthfully, they're all very, very, very positive. Like, I can see why this story is just in general really beloved, and I'm finding it to be like hard to, this book is like beautiful in the way that it captures our two main characters. They feel so real, and you want to just reach out and protect them and give them a hug. And you also know that they're a stand-in for just so many experiences across this world. But it's also harrowing because of the situation they're in, the reality that they're in, the political reality that they're in, that they have quite literally zero control about, and yet they have to make all of these difficult decisions, like leaving their home, leaving their family, knowing they might never be able to come back to a place, and it's just feels impossible, and yet these people have to make these impossible decisions every single day for themselves, for their families, to try to make it for another day. And yet when they get to the places, then people treat them like crap, and it's like, what did you expect them to do? Anyway, I'm getting very heated at 8 a.m. so I'm gonna keep reading this. Coffee. Read this book if you haven't. I'm pretty sure you probably have. A lot of people have already read and loved this, but it's excellent. Good morning. Coffee time. It is. In the process of making lunch, just waiting for the eggs to cook. And then I woke up early this morning. Let me flip you around. So addicted to puzzling. I woke up early and I started work basically 2 hours early so I could puzzle 2 hours earlier in the afternoon. So that's where I'm at right now with my life. Time for some afternoon coffee. I'm also about to sit down and listen to some of my audiobook, and I also wanted to update y'all and let you know that I only have about 50 pages left of Exit West. I am just really, really, really enjoying this book, and I plan to also finish this book tonight. So I have one book down, almost 2 books down, and I'm listening to my 3rd book of this vlog. So cheers. I'm going to try to sneak in a bit more of my 2nd audiobook for this vlog. Hi friends, so before I sit down and actually do my puzzle, I feel like I definitely owe you an update on Bands of Mourning, which I was able to listen to the prologue in the first 3 chapters of last night. It's so wild reading this series because truly each book just builds on itself so successfully. And if you just read the first one, you're like, this is all right. You've just got to keep going because it just gets so much better with every installment. The heart of this series is definitely the characters. In the first installment, you're introduced to Wax and Wayne. They are the dynamic duo of this series. One is very serious, one is very goofy. They are investigators coming from the wild, wild west and now finding themselves entrenched in city politics. The cool thing about the plot lines of these is it all builds. Everything is connected, which I think is great. Conflicts also grow and they're very, very large scale and interesting, and the plot twists are definitely there. On top of that, outside of just Wax and Wayne, we're slowly introduced to other characters as well. First, we have Marise, who is kind of a young woman who's trying to break it into law enforcement and stuff, and she's a very endearing character and I think a great foil to both Wax and Wayne in different ways. Their dynamic is cool, but what I am especially excited to encounter again in book 3 is Steris, who is one of my favorite characters in this series. She's very unique. She's a perfect definition of like an extreme planner. She's not very she's very guarded, not super emotional, and how she and Wax's relationship evolves, I think is a great testament to how like serialized crime series don't have to have the worst relationships of all time. You actually not only like Steris as a female lead, both of the female leads in this I feel like are given like a real and interesting and different personality with their own wants and desires that have nothing to do with the male leads. I think in the first one, this was definitely not the case, but through the second and third installment, you really start to see the development of their characters, which I, as a reader, really, really like. And just the plot lines are so engaging. And what I also like too is that there's a lot of winks to the genre itself, from train robberies and like all of these things that feel almost like classically cliche, where Brandon Sanderson accomplishes them in their own way. And the character development that I felt like we started to get into book 2 is continued into book 3, seeing insights into people's childhood, seeing insight into just the quirks that make people behave in the ways that they do. I feel like really brings these characters, which feel very flimsy initially, to be like fully realized, which I like. But truly at the end of the day, like the reason why I love this series is I can't put it down. It's just, there's so much action. The plot is so fast paced. And the audiobooks are truly incredible. The narrator is dynamic, and I feel like it really brings the whole thing to life in a way that I can't speak more positively of. You know, it's just too good. And it's just a really fun and engaging time, and also a perfect audiobook to pair with something like a puzzle or a video game or something. I promise you'll be like on the edge of your seat wanting to know what's going to happen next. That being said though, I'm going to try to listen to 3 more chapters, which I'm pretty sure will put me over the 100-page mark for this book, which will have me around 500 pages by the end of this vlog, which is my goal. But just wanted to give you an update because I feel like I haven't talked about the third one, which is Bands of Mourning, obviously straying away from talking about the literal plot as it is the 3rd book of a series, but just really wanted to like tip my hat to the really nice development across the board that's just present in this series by Brandon Sanderson, and just honestly how dang entertaining they are. Like, so fast, so much fun. I could read a million books following these characters. It's just incredible. Cheers, friends. Let's sit and finish Exit West. Finished this book, and wow, did it just absolutely take my breath away. This was stunning. I'm gonna wrap up my thoughts. I need to like think on this a bit, then I'll give you guys my final thoughts and feelings. Friends, so I plan to do some more contemplation about Exit West now that I finished it, but I did just want to speak to just the beautiful character journey that this book took us on. Obviously, I've spoken quite a bit about how this is definitely a story of immigration, and we're in the heads of these 2 young people, one as we see them fall in love, but we're also with them as they basically have to make one of the hardest decisions of their life, which is to leave a place that they had no intention of leaving in hopes of having a future for themselves individually or possibly together. And I think the cycle that we experience with these characters and seeing the different layers of their relationship was just so well constructed. There's so many different types of intimacy and closeness, and there's so many different ways, obviously, especially when these 2 characters are encountering so much trauma and change, and seeing these characters hold on tight to each other and seeing how their love and their relationship is going to evolve through time and through change, and also seeing them give themselves a chance at a life and feelings for themselves, even if it's so unbelievably scary. And also just inherently our 2 main characters, Saeed and Nadia, how they are together as a unit, how they are connected with each other basically forever through time due to the experiences and the trauma that they've had together. But ultimately we see leaving kind of happen at multiple points in this novel, and also the bravery and the choice of leaving, and how they will also be able to never go back or be that person that they were before. And this is kind of explored again in relationship dynamics, as well as the physical act of choosing to leave, which is also again very central to the story. And also just the act of having to evolve oneself in a new place is also going to intrinsically change you as a human being, no matter what you try to do. Still, the desire to hang on to people and elements and aspects of your past life and your past relationships as feeling of safety and loyalty is a big part of this book as well. And I think the dynamic nature of the relationships within the story and just kind of the full cycle of exploring that with our characters, even briefly. This book is not very long, and we follow a period of these two characters' lives very intimately. But at the end of the day, it's only small aspects of who they are and what they're feeling, and there's still a significant portion of their life that we have yet to see, even if it's hinted at. But we also know that these characters will always be in some ways connected to each other for the rest of time as well, just through shared experience. Not to say, as I feel like this book just painted such an emotional and rich picture of so many different types of outcomes to what is inherently just a very traumatic thing that millions of people have to experience every single year. And I feel like I'm rambling right now, but this book is just really beautifully crafted, really beautifully written, and I just feel like all the different angles that the author decided to include just worked so well. And that's not even to touch on the fantastical and like literary elements interwoven within this book too, because those were also exceptional. Just basically, this book is a 10 out of 10 and you should read it. And I feel like it's one that I'll revisit and come back to, and I feel like I'm gonna think about these characters for a very, very, very long time. Guys, and welcome to the end of the vlog. The next day, I just wanted to pop in and quickly wrap up everything I was able to read over the course of this vlog, which are these 3 books. So honestly, not bad, and I feel like a great way to start or jumpstart my reading for the year. First and foremost, I finished Shadow of Self. I had about 100 pages left of this book. I listened to it via audio. I've basically been talking nonstop about this series since I started the reread. So I was able to finish this and also read about 115 pages of Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. So good, so entertaining, and just I have been loving this reread and flying through it. I also read the entirety of Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, another book I just truly loved so much for entirely different reasons. Completely worth the pickup, and if you haven't read this book, I highly implore you to do so. It just feels like an incredibly important modern piece of literature, and I'm really happy I read this book, and I want to read other books by this author. He also wrote The Reluctant Fundamentalist, which I've also heard amazing things about, so I will for sure be checking that out very, very soon. But I have to say, I'm pretty pleased with everything I was able to read, not just due to quality, but also due to quantity. 3 books over 3 days, not bad, and I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!